Our first panel of the day looks at business continuity plans and how they performed in the wake of the pandemic, and asks what worked, where is there room for improvement, and how has COVID-19 changed strategic thinking around business continuity plans. I'll moderate the session, and joining me momentarily will be Trevor Latham, Chief Procurement Officer of Agreco, Anthony Petit, Chief Procurement Officer for Asta DM Healthcare, Imran Sharif, Head of Procurement, Middle East, Libya, Egypt, Central Asia, Turkey and Pakistan for Motorola Solutions, and Medhat Ismail, Procurement Director for Lafarge Holcim, UAE and Oman. Before we kick off, a quick reminder that if you would like to ask a question, please use the Q&A function next to your video window, and we'll get to questions towards the end of the discussion. So Imran, starting with you. You run mission critical government systems. Motorola is known for their big networks. With this in mind, how did you make sure that your business continuity plan was fit for purpose?
Well, Rob, to be honest, this is again a very interesting part. Being into mission critical business continuity plan and the importance of it in our line of business, it was already there. We did some, of course, because all our requirement comes in when the nation or overall we have a solution situation in hand. So it has been planned to face a similar kind of situation. But again, I'll be very honest with you that on this scale, because all what we did and planned for probably for certain countries or geographies, but not for this global phenomena. So this did hit us as well. But again, from the, I would say we were lucky that we were ready. We had planned things around. So it wasn't that we caught off guard, but certainly it would or had pushed us to look at things from a different perspective as well. Like there are, as our friends were talking earlier, that there are ripple effects and many things come into the picture which you cannot predict unless they come to the effect. So being into the mission critical, again, from all, we are as the frontliners. So we have to look that the business of our customer definitely does not interrupt it. Any first responders who either police, army, healthcare, 911, their systems, their employees, they keep working because they are relying on the back end on our efforts and the support. Similarly, the customer is on the front line fighting all this, and then our engineers and everybody is also there to support them. So keeping all of that, it was a challenge. But again, then we have looked at multiple scenarios, and the very, very, very key factor which was identified is to take care of your critical suppliers, who namely either can be supply-only suppliers or services suppliers, or performing any of these jobs, starting from the healthcare perspective and going forward. So this was planned. It came into effect. We went through the rigorous exercises, daily calls, multiple calls, weekly calls, and then gradually we come up to the point that we have reached that, okay, this is going to be now going forward a multi-year program. It's not going to be a one-time job, which earlier people thought of. And now we are looking every month to improve from the lessons learned out of these scenarios. It can be financial, can be logistical issues, can be supply chain health issues, any suppliers who is running out of business, their health issues, how to support them, to keep sure that our governmental, all departments keep working on that. And as the public is looking towards the government, their services cannot be interrupted.
Okay, so very interesting what you're saying there in terms of continually testing it. Medhat, what was your approach to testing your business continuity plan? I know that you've talked about a focus of health, cash and cost.
Good morning, everyone. So in Lafarge Holcim, I think we have initiated the program of health, cash, and cost, putting the health of our teams as a first priority. And then after that, we look to the cash and cost, mainly cash, which is the main important topic during this crisis. And therefore, in procurement, we have defined 5 priorities. The first one at the PO level, so to stop all the unmandatory or unnecessary POs, and to manage the open POs with our suppliers to reschedule the deliveries or to control the timeline of those POs. The second priority was related to account payables, how to manage the supplier payments and to agree with our key suppliers to reschedule the payment to make sure that we have proper cash flow in the company. The third one is we projected that the business will be downsized. So the sales, we projected that it will drop to 50%. That's why we have to cope at the same level with the spend. So we have to manage our cash out to be in the same level of our sales drop. The fourth one is to renegotiate all the spend lines with our suppliers, which is coming under the cost pillar of our program. So we renegotiated all the cost lines or the spend lines with our suppliers to make sure that we get the prices which will fit with the new situation. Last one was to review all the existing contracts to see how it fits with the new situation of the COVID-19 and after COVID-19 to make sure that we are moving in the right direction based on the new context and the situation.
Okay, and Trevor, now Greco is, I guess certainly your operations are very distributed. So for yourself, how did you stress test your continuity plan? You know, what did you do to go about stress testing it?
Right, so most continuity plans are sort of based on historical data and looking back, but like the others have said, that we really wanted to focus on incoming orders and outstanding POs. So we used our fairly new supplier onboarding platform. We were able to use that technology to go out and stress test all our suppliers that are on that list, if you like. We managed to reach nearly 6,000 key suppliers in 5 days. And then depending upon the results back from that stress test of the suppliers' responses, we were then able to sort of deploy management time and focus where it's needed. Because you're right, we couldn't possibly manage that situation, across the globe. So that's what we do. That stress test technology is still in place today, and we monitor our suppliers going forward on a daily and monthly basis. We were lucky enough, we're a project business, so we were lucky really not to have any major impacts on supply. The bigger issue for us was getting people around the globe with all the borders closed. So in some cases, we took 3 to 4 weeks hit on terms of delay to try and get people in to deploy those projects. But that's the option we took at Agreco.
See, that's very interesting because I think a lot of companies found that, didn't they? That part of their challenge was supply and getting it through borders. Now, Anthony, your industry has been critical in this period because healthcare, where would we be without, your industry? So has it significantly affected the planning that you do in terms of access to products, making sure that you can get hold of important equipment, new equipment that maybe you hadn't thought of before? So, and for your supplier network, how did you make sure that you could continue to deal with them, to access and get those pieces of equipment?
You're right, Rob. I mean, we're dealing with human lives. So if your supply chain is not robust, is not agile enough, it's not a missed sale, it's not a missed project, it's basically potentially human lives at stake. So we had to, stress test our suppliers, stress test our supply chain. And the first thing we've done before testing the robustness of our suppliers was to make sure that we were agile enough internally. And that was important because a few things had to be done and a change made to our company And then we requested our suppliers consequently to adopt the same changes within their organization to suit our needs. So one of the first things we've done is obviously change the approval chains, internal approval chains of POs, etc., to make it shorter, to make it more agile. We've also changed the selection criteria of any tender or RFP, whereby the price was less important, and obviously the lead time for delivery, the quality was, were the prime factors. And it was all about ensuring business continuity. And we've done basically a risk assessment, looked at the key products that were strategic. And interestingly enough, those products who were during COVID days or during the pandemic really strategic were not a few months back. So we had to redefine what was really strategic for us. Now on the external focus, how we stress tested and how we focused on making sure that our suppliers could absorb the shock was, first, we've applied the same principle as what we've applied, and we've asked them to have enough cash reserves. So during normal times, everyone wants to partner up with you. You are seen as a key client, but it's like in life, you see who your real friends are when you have a challenge, when you have a difficulty in adversity. And it's the same that happened, when the pandemic started. We've seen suppliers who claim to be our partners asking for complete 100% prepayment and had no guarantee whatsoever. So we selected our suppliers based on the ones who awarded us were agile enough and flexible enough to give us payment terms. We've asked for proof of stocks. You say you have those masks, those gloves, please prove that. We've asked for different HR policies that they had implemented, and like quarantine management. And it's particularly relevant for us when we outsource our cleaning services. So, your facility management companies who come to your hospitals, if you have 3, 4, 5 cleaners get contaminated, the whole workforce is being contaminated. How do you deal with that? So for us, it was very important for them to have this in place. And from a documentation perspective, because of course, this is quite specific to each and every industry, but in ours, we had to face a lot of potential counterfeit products. So it was very important to have documentation in place and ask the suppliers, if you have this particular problem and you have a suspect counterfeit product, what is your backup plan and what is your tertiary option? So testing the contingency plan of the suppliers by asking them, what is your plan A, your plan B, and your plan C?
Okay. Imran, I think you touched on this, and it has been touched on a couple of times, which is this whole area of relationships. You don't want your main suppliers to go out of business because it will significantly impact you. How did your thinking change around managing those relationships? Because at the same time, managing your cash flow during this time is so important because you don't want to also suffer.
Rob, absolutely 100% correct. Because in general, in organizations, I would say before this kind of a situation, normally procurement is considered as the safeguarding doors between the company and the suppliers, where all the responsibility of the relationship management between the suppliers, it was considered that if the procurement guys have looked at it, they have vetted, they are in touch with them, they will do all the magic and they will solve all the problems. But this magnitude has made very clear and realized at every level that supplier management or relationship management definitely has to improve multiple fold, not only the procurement organization, but also the managing director level, even at the CEO level, with the categorization of your critical supplier, that relationship has to be established. Because sometimes asking them the financial statements or their health check questionnaires or these things does not give you a clear indication when it comes to face-to-face reality. Many companies, even I would say when they used to do a 3-month or every 6 months, probably some business continuity meetings, plans to see, review, health checks. But now it has shown and it has gone up to that you not only need a financial health check, but you also need to see what government regulations are being implemented in their country where they are manufacturing. Are they even allowed to work at a full capacity? What if they are working at 30% capacity? What if they have a COVID cases, how they are reacting to it, how they are shutting down, and importantly, the logistic part of it. So if they have made a commitment with you on a business line or product line or services delivery, can they even do it? In many circumstances, even in the region, I'm giving you the live example, when lockdown happens and it happens on within a country, within a city level, we were not even able to mobilize our technical resources from one city to another. So you have to go through a lot of paperwork, ministerial approvals, all that to justify. So looking into the same, then we were preparing and gearing up our suppliers as well to the same level that guys talk, let's meet, daily meetings, weekly meetings, what you guys are doing, do you need any special permissions, all things along with that. So cash flow, again, yes, it was also important because no company just wanted to burn. Again, we were also looking to extend a mutual relationship, meaning wherever the partners can support under this situation, can extend pay terms for us, so we as a Motorola can help some suppliers who cannot afford. So rather than we have agreed with you to pay, this is the payment plan coming in, but can we delay it for 30 days? So because there is another critical supplier who needed our support. So we have gone through all these exercises, and that is a key when your other suppliers or overall as a family, they start to understand a model. Sometimes, and we have seen it, they have accepted to delay, bigger players have accepted to delay the payment so the smaller players can sustain in this environment. So this practice, I would say, is going to grow and continue, and meaning, coming back to the same point, that the relationship window has to be extended. Rather than having a phone or an email or relying on it, you have to have spoke to all the on the counterparts with their management, financials, business, because everybody has interest of their own company. They're looking at their multiple segments. But once you start to have a gel in, when everybody is looking for a single goal, then these problems start to resolve.
Okay, that's really interesting, and particularly the idea of where you're not just talking to your main supplier, but kind of jumping down the chain as well. Now Trevor, you're like I said at the beginning, what you deliver to people goes all over the world. We've probably all seen a Greco generator somewhere when we've been out and about. So when you have such a dispersed kind of model, what does that do for your payment policies? How did you cope when you're trying to bring all of this together?
So we've been working on our payment policies and extending our terms for the last 4 years, and we've actually doubled them over that period of time. And we've done that through, where possible, trying to standardize our policies on a regional basis. But of course, there's obviously regional exceptions to that. What we were really afraid of, because we're all over the world, we didn't want to be giving terms away, some here, some there, and then finding out at the end of the month or at the end of the quarter that we'd given a quite significant amount of cash away. So we're actually quite draconian in the early days by enforcing the payment terms policies and putting in place authorizations, which were quite stringent, and we made sure that senior management, etc., had to be involved in any payment terms change. We did, obviously, to people's point, get suppliers requesting reduced payment terms or upfront payments, etc. Our response to that was we launched a couple of years ago what we call a Greco early payment program, which, for want of a better words, is a supply chain financing program. So we were able to offer our suppliers the option to do that, to take that up, i.e. get paid through a third party quicker than us giving our terms away. And the demand for that in the last year or so has been quite significant. And you know, it's helped us maintain the terms that we have. We haven't really lost any terms in that regard.
What happens with people who don't want to accept those sort of terms?
Well, that's a discussion. What you generally find is the financing charges associated with it are lower than their normal cost of finance. So if you have that discussion with them, you can sell that across to them. Some of the very large suppliers typically aren't interested, but to Imran's point, those are the types of suppliers that can afford to maintain the terms as they are. So yeah, that's the discussion that we have, and sitting down with them and at least offering them something that if they need it, and it's flexible, they don't have to, you know, they don't have to change their terms forever. They can choose 1 month or 2 months, or when cash is tight, perhaps at year end or half year, and then the rest of the year they don't need it. So it is a flexible option, and people have the choice as and when they want to use it.
Okay, Medhat, the now, you know, for your industry, obviously, it's been quite interesting, really, because construction initially maybe slowed down, then we saw lots of push to get construction going again. How are you looking now? How have you changed your thinking so that you can start to almost account for the unknown unknowns that may hit you in the future? Because that's kind of what this is. Everybody had a business continuity plan, but I don't think anybody really thought that to this level it would have hit people.
Yes, I think this pandemic has changed the way how we are managing the business, and specifically in the procurement side. I think the main change on my side, I think, was moving from the total cost model when we deal with the suppliers to a cash cost model. So since we are moving to check what is the cash cost for them only, forget the other total cost with them for a while, in order to be able to sustain on the business. So this was the big change, and we had the discussion with our key suppliers that the earlier model of pass-through cost is no longer valid with the current situation, and we need now to think how to help each other to sustain. So yes, for the unknown things, we prepared different plans for different scenarios in order to see how we react in case of any shortage of supply, managing the inventories, the imports of material. Important message we shared with our suppliers that you have to manage your cost the same way we are doing. Otherwise, there will not be a partnership between both parts. This is important. So we looked on all our costs, fixed and variable, to make sure that we sustain and survive during the crisis. And we expect all our key suppliers to do the same way we have. So we are not asking them just a normal reduction or negotiation on the rates or prices we have. No, we are asking for restructuring of their cost in order to cope with what we have. This to be prepared for any surprises or any situations to come in the future. So to be able to be resilient enough to face any difficult situation.
Now, Anthony, I've spoken to you before, and my interpretation of what you've told me, at least, is that you almost described COVID-19 like a perfect storm, where despite having a strong business continuity plan in place, what you found was that the individual things that you'd accounted for, all hit at once, which then changed how you had to react to that business continuity plan, and how you had to cope with making sure that you could still function and still make sure that you could offer healthcare.
Indeed, I guess some of us didn't have any business continuity plan in place, and most of us had some, but as I like to say, just to tick the box, yes, we have a business continuity plan, and it will satisfy our auditors. But many of us didn't go into all the potential cases and adverse events that could happen to us. So it's not a big secret to say that most of our BCPs had one adverse events mapped. Like, you know, you've got a fire in your warehouse, what do you do? You've got a power outage, what do you do? But how many of us have predicted that you could have, you know, a fire in your warehouse and your warehouse manager being affected by COVID and down for 14, 15 days? That none of us, I guess, or very, very few of us. So I guess this was one of the challenges is this COVID event has learned us, has taught us to be, to explore all the different possibilities that could happen, actually map the key risks because you have 20, 30 different risks. But what you should do is focus on the top 2 or 3 that are most likely to have a severe impact and a high likelihood, and drill down and explore more and have, you know, a plan A and plan B and a plan C. One of the things that you know, could happen is, as you said, Rob, is simultaneous event. So that's one thing. But if you haven't planned all of that, you have to be prepared to improvise and respond and be agile. And that's the, you know, kind of the message that I would say is, at least if you haven't been prepared for simultaneous adverse event, be prepared to be agile enough. So communication is key, data, information is key. And the way we have reacted at Aster is by scrutinizing all public policies across the world, understand who was shutting borders, who was declaring that masks were from now on imperative to be worn, and who was putting a ban on export of ventilators and so on and so forth. By having that first mover's advantage, we could actually anticipate most of the challenges. So it's very important, like if I can give you an example, the day we've seen that China was shutting down their factories, we knew that 61% of the nitrile gloves capacity in the world would disappear or would be temporarily on hold. We immediately had a backup to switch to India, and India 2 weeks later shut down their border and put an export ban. We anticipated that and start sourcing in Thailand and so on and so forth. So it's being ahead of the game all the time to be agile enough and react, I mean, ensure that business continuity. That's pretty much the message I could convey.
Okay, that's very interesting, actually, that whole idea of trying to make sure you're agile and that you're keeping ahead of the game. And I mean, Imran, is this the point where you start looking more and more at things like localization?
Absolutely correct, because this was one of the major lesson learned what we had. Because earlier I would say, as a company, people get so comfortable with that you have a supply, you have a relationship going on. There is no need to change unless you know, things started to turn out. But then when this kind of event has happened and you got restricted, that all the airlines are shutting down, your shipping lines are shutting down, you have a very limited options or restrictions of everything as a combined a picture on the table. It 100% stressed on developing your suppliers, at least not possible if on a country level where you're working on, but at least on a regional level where you can achieve all these, your major requirement. That being said, definitely from even earlier, we were practicing trying to do any services, of course, which has to be acquired, they have to be acquired in a business. Multiple ways to support a country, government projects, that we are enhancing, you know, their revenue, we are enhancing their vision, we are giving more business in the region, in the country. But after this, it has added another meaning that if you have a local suppliers, your supply chain developed, especially, that can be most effective for the business, because then you can instantly go and secure whatever you need for the, especially for your end customer deliverables, which needs to be met with a certain SLAs. You cannot afford a downtime. So this definitely was a key.
Now, Trevor, right at the beginning, I heard you mentioning technology, and that's something we haven't explored. So for you, as you mentioned technology, how do you see it playing a role?
I think two ways: speed and efficiency, to be honest. We were able, as I said, to reach 6,000 suppliers in 5 days and still use that technology to manage many different events. As Anthony alluded to earlier, a lot of contingency or continuity plans where they talk about the process, they don't really talk about the implementation and how you go about that. So I think technology can definitely speed up implementation and execution. And as I said, from a payment perspective as well, technology has helped us maintain our payment terms, across the globe. So for me, I don't think we would have been as successful at Agreco if we hadn't used technology. Because of the scope of the company and where we are, we would not have been able to identify the problem areas, address them and put management time on that so quickly without the use of technology.
Okay, so I can see we've got questions coming in. So before we turn to those questions, I'm just going to ask, I'll ask Medhat and then Anthony. I just want to ask you about practicing your business continuity plan, because I can't remember whether it was Anthony or Imran, but somebody mentioned about too often a business continuity plan is almost used as a tick box exercise. So I think this COVID has taught us that it shouldn't be. Medhat, are you practicing it, and how are you making sure it becomes ingrained into the company culture?
Yes, in Lafarge Holcim, we have initiated in every country what we call it PRT team, the Business Resilience Team, who is in charge, and it consists of main management key persons, and this team is conducting practices for the pandemic response. So we have different resources, different scenarios, and then we put the plan how to react to it. So from easy to medium to difficult one. So the business resilience team and the business resilience exercises have been put and done by all the team to make sure that we have a ready plan for different scenarios. So now we have a monthly discussion on this PRT level. So in the beginning of the pandemic, it was a weekly, even we started with a daily discussion with the PRT team to share all the actions day by day, because in the time of the crisis, there was daily changes or daily updates. After that, we moved to weekly. Now we have it bi-weekly discussion or meeting on the PRT team. So we practiced and we put now the plans are in place for different scenarios.
Okay, and Anthony, because I know you've described the business continuity plan as you should be treating it like a fire drill.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like most things in life, if you practice, you'll get better at it. And not only you have to do that to enhance your coordination, because there could be communication breakdown in times of panic, in times of severe stress. You start forgetting things, you start having a misalignment, a misunderstanding. So practicing helps you to smoothen out any of these issues. But I will also say that practicing helps you to anticipate some of the things that you had not forecasted or predicted, and can help you to rectify your current BCP. And I'll just give you a little story because it's kind of funny. I used to work in the world, in a world leader for medical evacuation and security services. And we had a drill, a BCP drill every quarter. And one of the quarters, what happened is that the go grab bag, we had a bag with thermal blankets, with the whole list of staff, with a phone, with keys, with all sorts of things in there. The bag went missing because the cleaning lady put it at the reception. It was sitting next to the coordinator's desk. She saw a bag, lying down, and she just put it at the reception. So the bag was missing. No one could find it. So no one has ever had, ever anticipated that. And as an example, things could go wrong, and you have to be prepared for the worst. Just practicing helps you to anticipate some of those basic challenges, which you might have not thought about. So that's yeah.
Okay, so turning to the questions, we have a fair number of questions, and I can see two here which are related. So I'm going to tie them together, and I think maybe Trevor, but if somebody else also feels like they want to answer, please do leap in after. Trevor, we've got a couple of questions here about digitalization. One is, how has digitalization helped companies manage the situation? And then how can the digitalization of procurement, well, how could those technologies help business leaders drive better decision making in these sort of situations?
So at Agreco, we're using digitalisation of our fleet and also of our supply chain. So that's given us data that we probably didn't have before. We can take that back to the management. We can make our strategies. We can link that to things like our inventory strategy and our distribution strategies. But all our assets at Agreco, for instance, are totally monitored. So we know the performance of them. We can predict service intervals. We can predict what parts are required in the field going forward. So we've basically created a data lake which we can use to make better judgments on our business. And that's not just in procurement. That's certainly a big thing in operations for us at the moment. And that's what's driving, that's our sort of our digitalisation strategy.
Okay. And then another question here is that a lot of companies at the moment are in the respond phase, particularly with their business continuity plan. The questioner is asking, how do you move to the rebuild phase? So how do you start thinking about recovery? And is that the time when you should start looking for the risk-based strategy, all the different aspects of risk-based strategy? I think maybe that's for, I don't know, maybe Anthony or Imran.
Yeah, sure. I can answer part of the question. I guess we already started ourselves to look at the recovery strategy. And one of the things that this pandemic has fundamentally changed is all the paradigm around lean management. Being cheaper, more effective, have zero stock. And then you realize that to face such pandemic, you actually need to be much agile and much more flexible to respond to those adverse events. So what we're trying to do is basically incorporate some agile concepts into a lean management policy, or vice versa. Some companies do, they're being agile with some lean principle in their agile supply chain. So this is something that most of our business across the world have started doing. And it's a good time to do so, because most of our suppliers and your suppliers are trying to adapt to that pandemic, are trying to see what are the change in the customer's requirements in terms of cash, in terms of quality, in terms of delivery for lead time for delivery, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's a good time to start discussing all of that and reshaping your procurement function and the back-end supply chain.
Okay. Now, I guess another question here is, what would be the key points to consider for 2021 as you start evaluating your plans, I guess your budgets, and what your strategy is going to be going forwards? Imran or Medhat?
Medhat, if you want it to go, otherwise. Okay, so again, I think beautifully Anthony just phrased out that all the plans, they were there, and now what we are looking at and what we are going through, every company with his line of business has learned some lessons out of it. They have to be definitely incorporated, and additionally, additionally to the point, even certainly there are some partnership programs to be established, which your suppliers earlier, if there was a barrier that they are purely a supplier, you were purely a company who was their customer, so you have to come out of that form. It has to be a joint program. You need to run close supplier management during the next year as well. Especially, I would say, because for every company, finance cash flow is a main key. So you have to jointly look into 2021 because of the COVID. Government, as well as they haven't announced much projects, which normally we see at the end of Q3 or Q4 for the next year planning, which gives a boost to every company. Now, looking into that scenarios, of course, with your stakeholders as you're working within the company, your outside stakeholders, to me, are becoming more important as well with your supplier, because they anticipate the same feedback from you. They are looking towards you as well. So working with them closely, aligning with them on the cash flow challenges, what you're going to see or what you're going to have, so they can be alerted, and as well as localization of the resources, localization of the material, localization, whatever you can grab hands on. Either it can be an investor program, somebody can invest for you and have your supplies be readily available for you in the region, because this is what we are also looking at. But again, this has to go hand in hand with your next year planning. But the key message is that not all the planning shall be in-house. It has to be out the door as well. You need to connect all the dots, because otherwise you may not be able to deliver whatever the best you plan in-house.
Okay, thank you. And I can see here, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but I can see more questions coming through. But I feel that some of them we have touched on in terms of, and actually, Imran, you touched on some of one of these questions here in terms of thinking about decision making and who you need to involve, etc. Now, this has been a really interesting discussion. I think that we've had a lot of good advice here, talking about being agile, looking at your supply chains, looking at how you can manage your cash flow, and whether localization is the answer in some places. So thank you, everybody, for a really candid discussion. Our next session in this track will be in about 8 minutes at 11:35 UAE time. It will be a panel discussion called Implementing a Data-Driven Procurement Strategy. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.